So why did the ministry decide to do a beach access and management policy for Jamaica? We identified some key issues that we wanted to, that we thought that were related to our beaches that we wanted to seek to address to provide the policy prescription. Some of these main issues are the unavailability of access point to beaches, the lack of beaches of a good standard for the public, meaning beaches with amenities so that you can recreate comfortably on these beaches, objection of some members of the public to the payment of fees or the level of fees required for accessing these public bathing beaches, the loss of physical and visual access to the coastline due to extensive coastal development, and we call this ribbon development, and the rerouting of major roads in some cases, the divestment of former public beaches to private interests without consultations, and the prohibitive costs of access to beaches that have been divested. Additionally, there are some other issues related to informal settlements on beach lands. There are some beaches across the island that we have this situation existing. The lack of maintenance and amenities at several of the island's public bathing beaches. There are no beaches gazetted under Section 52 of the Beach Control Act, and this is a section of the Act where the authority, the Beach Control Authority, can have consultations with the owner operator of beaches and the relevant municipal corporation to fix the fee for access and the poor coastal water quality. Of course, issues related to climate change, coastal erosion, loss of seagrass beds and degradation of the reef structures, lack of maintenance of sea defenses. These are physical sea defenses like groin, sea walls, breakwaters, the building on sand dunes, inadequate safety measures at some of the island's beaches. We've had issues with noise pollution on beaches. Some persons have parties until all hours at varying levels. Sargassum also is also another emerging issue related to our beaches. So we sought to try to address many of these issues in the beach access and management policy. So we have a photo here because when we speak about a beach, there are different elements of a beach, and we have divided a beach into basically the foreshore and the backshore. And the foreshore is the area of land adjacent to the sea where the tide ebbs and flows. Basically the wet part of the sand or gravel. That's the foreshore, and the backshore is that area after the natural line of vegetation. So we consider the beach to be of two key elements, the foreshore and the backshore. And then what is very interesting in that in the 1956 legislation that governs the island's beaches, there's no definition of the term beach. And so we have proposed a definition, and so if and when the policy is approved, we will amend the legislation to include the definition for the term beach. And we have defined beach as any coastal lands, whether natural or man-made, that is generally composed of sand or similar sediment, and is constituted of both the foreshore and the backshore. And then we've gone on further to define what is a public beach, because of course, you know, there are private beaches, commercial beaches. So a public beach is defined as any beach that is owned, managed, or leased by a government entity. And Mrs. Roy Myrie also mentioned who those government entities are: the National Land Agency, the municipal corporations, the National Environmental Planning Agency. Those are some of the, and UDC, for instance, are some of the government entities to which the public has a right of use for lawful recreation or easement to or over the area by prescription, donation, or as per Section 14 of the Beach Control Act, has amenities, security features, and meet public health standards. We've also defined public bathing beach, and of course these are beaches owned, managed, or leased by a public entity and are free of charge to the public. So we'll have these beaches which are free of charge, and we will designate those as public bathing beaches. Then we have public recreational beaches, and the distinction is that these are beaches where there will be a fee charged for either entrance or use of the amenities. And then, of course, we have commercial recreational beaches, and these are beaches that are owned by a private entity for which are fees charged for entry and or use of the facilities. All of them, but the key one is the Beach Control Act of 1956, which has several regulations under it governing safety, licensing arrangements, and issues related to hotel, commercial, and public recreational beaches. There's also the Natural Resources Conservation Authority Act, which is the principal environment legislation for Jamaica. The Town and Country Planning Act, which deals with physical planning. And under the Town and Country Planning Act, we have development orders. And in these development orders are listed all of the public bathing beaches. And there are policy prescriptions in the development orders about these beaches. We also have the policy, framework, and procedure manual for the divestment of government-owned lands. And why this is important is because in this particular document, it specifies already that the preferred option for public beaches or beach lands is not to sell them, but to have leasehold. That is the preferred option. And of course, the master plan for sustainable tourism development, because of course our beaches are a key part of our tourism product. Under the policy, what is the purpose of the policy? The purpose of the policy essentially is to increase access to the foreshore at a minimum by the public and to improve the standard of the beaches available to the public. Our vision for the policy is that Jamaica's bathing beaches are preserved, well managed for present and future generations, and provisions is made for adequate access to these beaches for the enjoyment of Jamaicans and visitors alike. And then there are several policies and principles governing the beaches in the policy. And one of the big things is that beaches are a national asset and must be preserved and maintained for present and future generations. Coastal developments must be planned and managed. And existing beach access opportunities should be maintained, new or increased public access provided, including in new developments. And of course, the traditional rights of fishermen must be preserved. The policy has 6 goals, and one is related to the establishment of an effective institutional arrangement for the regulation and management of beaches. The second one is increased physical access to the foreshore, the floor of the sea, and the water column above it. Expansion of beach-related recreational opportunities. The fourth goal is institution of measures for pollution control, waste management, and the safety for the protection of users of the coastal resources. The fifth is management of the fishing beaches and protection of the traditional access rights of fishermen. And the sixth is the protection of the coastal resources and increasing resilience to the impacts of climate change. And these 6 goals have strategic actions which relate to them, and we have policy measures that relate to these strategic actions. So when we speak about access, we're not only talking about physical access, we also talk about visual access, because this is very, very important. Let us talk about some of these measures, policy measures as relates to access. So where we have fees charged for public recreational beaches, these will be fixed in line with the Regulation 52 of the Beach Control Act. And as I said before, this is where the Beach Control Authority, which is the NRCA, will consult with the owner-operator of these beach lands and the relevant municipal corporation to fix the fee for access. And these are the public recreational beaches. For commercial recreational beaches, these are beaches, of course, owned by private interests. And again, the NRCA, in consultation with the owner or operator, will fix the fee for these commercial recreational beaches, which need a license to operate. Hotels will be encouraged to implement a beach pass system to facilitate access by the public to the hotel beaches. And of course, this is something that we will promote, that hotels can have like day passes for the public to be able to access the beaches which are associated with hotels. The right of the public to walk along the foreshore and bathe in the sea will be provided through an amendment to the Beach Control Act. And right now, the foreshore and the floor of the sea are vested in the Crown. That means that the government has responsibility for the foreshore and the floor of the sea. Unless there is a title, a registered title, that gives the private property owner that right. There are not many of those. So what we want to do is to make it a right for the public to have access to the foreshore at a minimum and to bathe in the sea through an amendment to the Beach Control Act. And of course, access to the coast will be planned and managed to protect coastal resources as well as public safety. And very importantly, we want to have a minimum distance of between 8 to 30 meters adjoining the foreshore to allow persons to have access. Very importantly, the policy also recommends that public beach lands not be sold unless approved by Cabinet. Also, the policy recommends exclusive use of the foreshore will not be approved, whether by lease or license, or except as per a registered title or in the interest of public safety, in the case of port and harbor facilities and oil platforms, and in the case of overwater structures where security considerations have to be taken into account. But other than those exceptions, exclusive rights or use of the foreshore will not be approved, whether by lease or license. And of course, all public beaches will be reserved in development orders. And all beaches in which the NRCA has an interest shall be accessible to the public. The development of a beach inventory and plan for each parish is also something that is also advocated in the draft policy. And of course, all of these beaches will have signage. And we want these access points, as Mrs. Roy Myrie said in her presentation, that there will be a sign that shows you, how do we access this beach? How does the public access this beach? And so we will also gazette these access points. Reservation of beach access for the public in close proximity to the beach when divesting beach land is also recommended. Diversion of coastal roads to create exclusive access for development should be avoided. Development on the seaward side of coastal main roads should also be so arranged as to provide windows to the sea. So no longer are we advocating for this ribbon development. We want not only that we have physical access to the coastline, but we also want to have visual access to the coastline. Of course, there are some beaches that we will call seaside parks. And these seaside parks are beaches in which we do not recommend that you bathe because of safety considerations. But these are parks where you can sit and relax and enjoy and take in the vista. And these types of beaches where you are not allowed to bathe because of safety considerations, we will designate as seaside parks. And these seaside parks, we are recommending that admission to these public ones be free or at a minimal charge. And divestment of the seaside parks owned by the public entities shall be by leasehold only. So this is in line with the policy prescription that beach lands are not to be sold. They should only be leased unless approved by Cabinet. The siting and design of developments along the coast to allow the public physical and or visual access to the coast. And in terms of management issues, the policy prescriptions are that there will be a national beach management program. And of course, we've started elements of that program already. NEPA has taken the lead on that as a beach control authority. But the work being done by the Tourism Enhancement Fund, NEPA, TPDCO, and others will be part of this national beach management program. We are also advocating in the policy that civil society organizations, local-based community groups, where they have the capacity, that they be so empowered to be allowed to manage and sustain the use of beaches within their community. Also, where there are opportunities to lease beaches owned by the government to the private and the community-based organizations, that will be promoted. Because of course, we need to have funds to maintain the beaches. And so in some regards, some ways, we will have to still lease beaches to private interests and to the community-based organizations. But we ask that where these lease arrangements exist, that they make sure that as many Jamaicans as possible, the average Jamaican, can have access to these beaches. Of course, the NRCA, which is the Beach Control Authority, will identify and take steps to upgrade the beaches which it owns, including those which may be potentially leased to commercial interests. And where public beaches to be acquired for use by a commercial entity, the right of the public to access a beach should be preserved and a license granted under the Beach Control Act rather than a lease. Offshore coastal properties. Now, many of us may not know that Jamaica is an archipelago. It has over 78 islands, rocks, and keys. And these offshore coastal properties we're advocating in the policy, owned by the Crown, those which are owned by the Crown, should not be sold. All coastal lands currently held by the government and vested in the Crown, if being divested, will not provide for private property rights for an area 30 meters wide inland from the high water mark, and this is to allow for access. And the NRCA, in a collaboration with the Town and Country Planning Authority and the local planning authorities and the National Land Agency and other government entities, will continue to pursue the policy of reservation of beach properties in subdivisions, direct acquisition, because one of the big things with the beach control authority is that where there is a need to create beaches in the interest of the public, the authority has the mandate to do so. So where we don't have adequate beaches, the authority has the mandate to acquire lands to create beaches to allow the public to be able to recreate comfortably on these beach lands. So we will direct acquisition or acceptance of donations of properties from private property owners. And just to say too that we have in the past private property owners donating beach lands to the NRCA through the National Environment and Planning Agency in the public interest. So we have examples of those. Of course, in keeping with Section 12 of the Beach Control Act, the authority will identify and acquire suitable properties, as I said before, in the public interest for use as beaches or seaside parks, and whenever the opportunity arises or where the ecological sensitivity demands it. One of the big things that we want to do with access is to make information available to the public. So the NRCA issues beach licenses. So if you need to do an activity in the foreshore, the floor of the sea, you have to get a license from the authority. So we want to make these licenses accessible to the public. So one of the things that the policy advocates is the development of a register. So where you have beach licenses which are issued, renewed, suspended, or revoked, all of that information will be in a register which is accessible to the public for inspection. And of course, the NRC, in consultation with the relevant local public health departments and the local planning agencies, will ensure that warning signs are placed at conspicuous places on public beaches, advising of any hazards that the beach may pose to public safety. And of course, the NRCA will continue to monitor beach activities to ensure that the beach safety regulations are observed. And this is a big issue about the water sports regulations. The water sports regulations of 1985 will be amended with the revision of the Jamaica Tourist Board Act. And this is relating to beach safety as it relates to motorized marine vehicles. The regulatory and resource management agencies of central and local government will develop partnerships with stakeholders and civil societies to improve monitoring and enforcement of coastal water quality standards. And the owners and operators of beaches also will be asked to develop programs and plans to monitor coastal water quality. And the health departments are asked to institute and implement a recreational water quality monitoring program with specific emphasis on water quality at public bathing and recreational beaches. The owners, in terms of noise, owners and operators of beaches shall ensure that beach users do not create noise at such a level that disturbs either those persons at the beach or the neighboring properties or wildlife on the coast, because some persons may not know, but some marine life are disturbed by noise and light. And so we have to also regulate noise pollution, not only for people, but also for the marine life that is at the beach. Noise levels at functions held on public bathing and public recreational beaches with a duration of more than 5 hours, should not exceed 70 decibels. Informal settlements. We have some informal settlements on some beach lands across the island. And wherever those informal settlements are identified, they will be brought to the attention of the authorities. And the Ministry of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment and Climate Change is in the process of doing an informal settlement survey, and beach lands are included in that survey. Of course, we also have beach sand quarrying. This is a major issue, and in response to that, the National Environment, the NRCA, stroke the National Environment and Planning Agency, has developed guidelines for the quarrying of beach sand, and this document will be used by the authority in the terms of their issuing of permits and licenses for sand quarrying, beach sand quarrying. One of the big issues is the management of fishing beaches and the protection of the traditional rights of fishermen, because we talk a lot about bathing and recreational beaches, but we don't talk a lot about the fishing beaches. One of the policy prescriptions in the draft document is that the prescriptive rights of fishermen will be preserved by the NRCA in accordance with the provisions of the Beach Control Act. The need for safe harbor by fishermen must be paramount in consideration of applications for a license for the use of the foreshore. And you'll recall that I said if you need to do any activities in the foreshore, the floor of the sea, you must get a license from the NRCA. And the National Fisheries Authority will work in conjunction with the NRCA and other relevant government bodies and NGOs to secure the tenure of fishers on designated fishing beaches. The National Fisheries Authority will prescribe measures for the management and development of fishing beaches. And very importantly, the National Fisheries Authority will encourage fisher groups, where they have the capability to manage these fishing beaches. They will also be empowered to do so. And we have some beaches which are both fishing and bathing, and the policy advocates for co-management strategies to be developed for these joint fishing and bathing beaches. And then the Public Health Department and the National Fisheries Authority will continue to monitor these fishing beaches to ensure that appropriate sanitary conveniences are in place so that both the fishers and the general public are comfortable in accessing these fishing beaches. Of course, areas will be delineated and licenses will be issued for activities that will be allowed in terms of mariculture activities. And these mariculture activities will be regulated by the National Fisheries Authority. One of the things with fishing beaches is that the National Fisheries Authority is of the view that right now we need to rationalize or strategically rationalize the number of fishing beaches. And so at this point, no new fishing beaches will be created, but the idea is to ensure that the existing fishing beaches are brought up to a standard that the fishers and the general public can have ease of access and are comfortable on these beaches. And then through the cooperation of the various ministries and other agencies involved in managing the coastal areas, the government will establish rules for the tenure of fishing beaches and promote improved conditions of fisherfolk operating on such beaches. One of our last things is about decision making and climate change. So we will take an ecosystem-based approach to the management of beaches. Projections of the impact of climate change on the beaches will be taken into account in the planning of development on beach lands. And of course, some members of the public may know, if they don't know also already, we have state of the climate reports for Jamaica, and these are online. These kinds of documents must be utilized in taking decisions where we are planning for development on beach lands. Structures above the mean high water mark shall be located behind the natural sand dune or ordinary line of vegetation. Where we have coastal developments, they must take climate change into account. One of the things that we have here is that because some of our beaches are eroded and severely eroded, especially those on the eastern side of the island, in the past we have used technologies to help with the receding coastline. And so we may have to do that in the short to medium term while we seek to rehabilitate our natural sea defenses, meaning our coral reefs, our seagrass beds, or mangroves. So we may have to put in use of other technologies, other man-made structures to help to secure the beaches and the coastline while with the natural sea defenses are rehabilitated. And of course, one of the main things, of course, is this development and dissemination of information to the public on our beaches. And of course, Mrs. Roy Mary in her presentation also mentioned the Jamaica Beach Guide, which provides a lot of information to the public on the state of the island's beaches. And more will be disseminated by various key stakeholders.